Welcome back to the Wellbeing and Practice podcast, bringing you the latest in complementary, integrative, and functional medicine conversations. I'm Tanya Borofsky, Head of Education here at Amrita, and your host. Today, I have with me a fantastic colleague, Dilly Kular, who is the CEO of Nouveau Healthcare, and he is known to many of you who are naturopaths, functional medicine practitioners, and so he will be no surprise to you. And he is a mine of information and has just the most brilliant way of making any potentially dry topic less than dry and very engaging. Welcome to the podcast, my friend Dilly.
Thank you for having me, Tanya. I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
Great. So we're going to be talking about acid reflux, which is one topic that you've dug into very deeply, and you've become sort of quite fascinated with. But before we talk about that, and I pick your brains on acid reflux and how we can go about supporting and reducing that, could you explain to our listeners, many of whom are practitioners, but we have also many of our practitioners' guests and clients listening as well, uh, who you are and how you sort of got involved in working in healthcare and sort of collaborating with us here at Amrita?
So, where do I get start? About 11 years ago, I
Yeah, not when
was
you're 11. Let's not
yeah,
start there.
11 years ago.
When I was 11.
When I was 11 years old, so yeah. So when I was
Yeah.
about 11 years ago, I became fascinated by health because I had my own issues. I had urticaria. I was severely
Okay.
overweight. I was about 26 stone at my heaviest. So I was a
Wow, I didn't know this, Dilly.
Yeah, I was a big dude, and look, just me. I had a big heart, but I was a big dude, and I started reading a lot about health and trying to understand it. And I remember, like, when I was growing up in my community, we had like the bodybuilders and people that did the different health
Yeah,
things, and we met a doctor and he introduced us to this product Toxaprevent. And when I say he opened my mind up to natural health, but in
yeah,
a medicinal sense, it changed the way I thought about health. And I started realizing that when we listen to somebody, a lot of the information is third removed or fourth removed. And my kind of like interest came into it was trying to treat myself, as many of us aware of.
yes,
We kind of stumble into this when we're trying to treat ourselves. Bearing in mind I was a lot younger back then, and I was I'd call myself a naive kid with my kind of like my eyes wide open trying to absorb everything. But then I started realizing that so much of health was interconnected, but we were so focused on treating the symptoms, we weren't
yeah,
interested in treating the root causes. And that's where I kind of opened into the health industry and have now understood that sometimes it's keeping it simple is so much easier.
yeah. Amazing. I didn't know that about you, Dilly. So that's thank you for sharing that and being sort of so open with us. So that then led you into creating the company that you represent now, and we'll go on to talk about Toxin Prevent. But that was your first product that you distributed, correct?
Yep. So we
Yes.
literally just grew. We kind of like slowly started finding very niche areas or
Yes.
health conditions, and then finding specific products or investing in research on those specific products or building our background around them. So we've
Love it.
slowly become like we're now like the experts in in vitamin D, in histamine, in ammonium, in acid reflux, in mold, mycotoxins. But we just the problem is, well, so the problem, the funny thing is, we kind of go to the nth degree of research, and sometimes, and just kind of unpacking that is the fun part of it, I think. And I think
Yeah.
I'm quite fortunate in my like position that I'm able to spend a lot of time and just to read through. And I love that's what I try to do is try to break things down and make it easy for people to understand.
Yeah, and you do that very well. So with that, you do it infinitely well. So with that, the focus of today's conversation, there will be many more. We want to sort of talk about acid reflux, which will absolutely bring in ammonia and histamine as well. But can you explain? So can you Dillify. What is that? What's it? What is acid reflux, and what do we know are or do we believe is the pathophysiology, the main causes of this? Could you explain that for me?
Oh, where do we even start with this?
Okay, well, let's split it apart. So acid reflux is,
So acid reflux is it's stomach acid that that comes up the esophagus,
yeah.
and it can burn the back of the throat.
Hmm.
That's what they call acid reflux. But then you have the cousin of it, which is called GERD, or gastroesophageal reflux disease, and that's where you
Hmm.
have chronic acid buildup. So the focus on those two is just acid coming up through the past the up the LPS into the back of the mouth, and it causes that burning sensation. And it's normally linked with things like heartburn, for example, and this real pain in the middle of your chest.
Which can, to some people, feel like that it's a warning sign for a heart attack.
It is very, very, very common. It's one of the most common conditions in the world. I think the estimates it's close to allergies in terms of how many people in the world suffer from even minor amounts of acid reflux.
Yeah.
And we're actually now seeing a real bad epidemic with younger children with acid reflux.
And do we believe, is that, I mean, I would imagine that there is an element of that that is due to our growing obesity epidemic in children, because there is a pressure on the lower esophageal valve, or no?
Yeah, obesity. So, like, when we kind of go into like the causes, obesity does play a role, but we have to look at what causes the obesity,
Of
and it's
course.
down to the foods that the person's consuming. Like, you look at the what's given to children in terms of like food groups. If a child is given heavy amounts of carbohydrates, it's understandable. Parents are busy. We're like, you both parents now work. There's no such thing as like, the mom stays at home. Everything's changing now. So because of that, our food groups and what we're eating is completely changed.
Yep.
And so we're now seeing not just obesity, but the foods that kids are consuming in the morning and at night is changing the buildup of the acid. And so, like, the people talk about the causes being weight, but weight is just one aspect. It's okay to focus on that, but we need to understand what's going into the food that's going into the person to cause that rise in obesity.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And what would you say, what do you commonly see are other, I wouldn't say easy causes, but sort of what is your sort of checklist, if you like, if you have a sort of a mental checklist when you're thinking about, okay, this individual is presenting with chronic with GERD, and what is your checklist to go through of the underlying root causes that could present in that?
I mean, so like I said, the what the person's eating,
Yeah,
how late they're eating,
yeah,
how heavy of a meal are they eating, what's in that meal, what's going on with the liver. There's all these little things that go into it. And I'll say the liver because of the ammonium and histamine content. Like if they're eating heavy amounts of heavy, like protein meals, and we're
yeah.
talking heavy amounts of meat, meat's a byproduct of meat is ammonium, which impacts the liver. And that can impact how our body breaks it down, which can increase acid. So there's the checklist is very difficult because it becomes on a case by case basis. Because if
Right.
someone's been using PPIs from a very young age, so proton pump inhibitors,
Yeah.
or antacids as they like to be called, depending on which one they're using, they can also disrupt that equilibrium in the stomach acid.
Okay. Okay. So you've talked about ammonia and ammonium. Can you explain what those are and what is the link to that build up with acid reflux?
So, you asked at the start about what my interest became with acid reflux.
Yeah.
It actually all stemmed from H. pylori. I
Yeah.
was fascinated by H. pylori. I just literally couldn't understand how something had gone so far through history and was on that like the top 20 WHO list of bacteria that need to be destroyed. And when I started looking at H. pylori, I came across that word ammonium. And I kept thinking,
Right.
what the heck is ammonium? Like, why is H. pylori using this? And the difference between ammonia and ammonium is just hydrogen. It's simply just the hydrogen atom being added to ammonia
Hmm.
to convert it to ammonium. And when I
So
started,
that it can be removed from the body, right?
it's actually no, it's so H. pylori can use it as a protective shield. It's how H. pylori protects itself from the rise in gastric acid.
Right.
So that's the for ammonia. So, but ammonia is a byproduct of protein. It's also
Yes.
produced by H. pylori, and ammonia isn't bad. Don't get me wrong; it's not bad in its sense. And what I mean by it's not bad is that I mean it's easily broken down by the system. The body is able to break it down, but then you have to look at the aspect of histamine. Now, when you add a histamine into this context of things, you've got this cycle of continuous acid being produced. And I'm probably going to confuse everyone because probably like, why
Hang
the
on a
hell is
moment. Why you've jumped a bit there? So we were talking about ammonia and ammonium. How can you just explain how that then links to histamine?
cool?
Just
So
yeah.
so ammonia is a byproduct of protein, and it's
Yes.
also produced by H. pylori. So H. pylori is known as a urease enzyme excreting bacteria.
Yes.
That's where it divides uric acid into carbon dioxide into ammonia. And when ammonia is high, what happens is it uses it as a protective shield. But to do that, it must first convert the ammonia into ammonium.
Right.
To do this, it basically increases stomach acid, which releases hydrogen. Hydrogen
Yes.
then attaches to the ammonia and it creates that bond of ammonium. And then what H. pylori does is it wears it as a protective shield because what ammonium does is it alkalizes the stomach acid. And so what H. pylori does is it needs to protect itself from a very strong gastric environment, and that's what ammonium is. It's a protective shield, but it's also very toxic to the body. But that increase in acid is actually created also by H. pylori, which actually releases the histamine from the mast cells that line the stomach lining. And that increase in histamine, whether it's from food or from the H. pylori, is what triggers that release of that high stomach acid. And that's how H. pylori utilizes that ammonium.
Right. Great. Thank you for completing that circle. That makes complete sense. And so histamine, so we now have a situation of a, a of an H. pylori embedded infection, uh producing producing more and more hydrogen ions, which makes it more acidic, and we're also now producing more histamine. So we've got a histaminergic situation. We've got we've got a very acidic environment as well.
So if we kind of go back into like what happens in the basic digestive tract and how we digest food, like
Yep.
just to kind of give people a bit of an understanding. So when we eat or whatever, when our body starts to salivate, we produce the hormone gastrin. And when
Yes.
gastrin releases, and what gastrin does is it basically triggers the release of histamine from something called enterochromaffin cells.
Mm-hmm.
And these cells, when it releases that histamine triggers something called the histamine 2 receptor. That's a receptor that's located in the gut. That histamine 2 receptor then triggers the body to go, oh, we're about to eat, release the stomach acid,
Mm-hmm.
or shall we say, increase the stomach acid. So the stomach acid, that's how it's increased. And that's the basic understanding of how histamine works. So people focus on histamine as people with histamine intolerance, as it's known, will look at it and it's been linked with an increase in acid reflux, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does completely make sense. And so Toxaprevent, which is a product, which is okay. Well, actually, I won't. So, what is Toxaprevent? Because it is a multifaceted product that can help to bind histamine and it can bind ammonia as well. So, could you? That's and it's so it's but it doesn't bind. And very importantly, it doesn't bind minerals, which is
Mm.
very important. So, could you talk to how in this type of situation, how the use of this particular product, how it makes sense to use something like that?
Do you think we could take a step back and just talk about
Yeah.
PPIs? Would that be okay?
About
Just because
what?
about PPIs. about proton
Yeah,
inhibitors.
please. Yeah.
So the reason why I brought up the gastrin and the enterochromaffin cells was because of PPIs. We were talking about proton pump inhibitors. I was saying when you want to look at what we do when we diagnose someone with acid reflux, the problem with
Mhm.
proton pump inhibitors. Now, to give you a bit of context, when we launched in 2006 in Germany, our product was a replacement. So Toxprent was a replacement for PPIs. And the reason being was because of the binding of ammonium histamine. And then what when we were working on it in basically a couple of years ago, I started looking at proton pump inhibitors, and I sat down with Dr. Sarah Myhill,
Yeah, yeah.
as everyone knows. And Sarah said to me, she goes, Dilly, she goes, the stomach acid is the first preventative of like all bugs in
Yep.
the body. When the stomach acid is high and the body produces it. And the problem is we have this what I call the PPI pandemic. And I'm allowed to use the word pandemic now, right? It's been a
You
couple of
are
years.
definitely allowed to use the word pandemic. Next slide, please.
Yeah. So the reason why I say PPI is because I don't know if you've seen this, like shops like Holland and Barrett now have now got their medicinal homeopathic products, how they call them. They've,
Yeah.
they've got like the Nexium. And what we started to look at was how PPIs worked in the body. And what proton pump inhibitors do is they stop the production of acid.
Uh-huh.
And when you stop the production of acid, it doesn't make sense because the stomach acid produces the acid cells and bicarbonate on a 1-to-1 scale. So
Yes.
gastrin, what happens is when acid goes up and the body's digesting food, the parietal cells will produce bicarbonate to counteract the stomach acid.
Yeah.
That's the basic function of it. But what they're finding is what PPIs do is they stop the production of acid. And so the stomach lining sees this and it starts to increase the release of gastrin. And then what gastrin does is as the gastrin starts to increase, that then triggers the release of more histamine because the body's like, well, hold up, the acid's too low. I need to trigger this release of histamine. And because it's triggering that release of histamine, if that if the receptor's being triggered with histamine, the acid is going to continue to increase. So the doctor says to you, well, actually, sir or madam, you need to continue taking the PPI for longer, which then creates a perpetual cycle of this
Yeah.
constant increase. Now, the issue here becomes this: the doctor will then look at giving you a histamine 2 receptor antagonist, like an antihistamine. I think it's for the life of me, I think it's is it famotidine or fexofenadine? I think it's famotidine they give to the person prescribed to it, and that's an antihistamine for the histamine 2 receptor, which blocks
Yeah.
it. That therefore means that the histamine is not attaching to that receptor. And because it's not attaching to that receptor, that histamine then circulates and attaches to one of the other receptors. So
Yeah.
that's just one aspect of PPIs. And that absolutely fascinated me, that one aspect of it. And I kept thinking to myself, like, why PPIs, there's no longitudinal data. Did you know that there's no data past 13 weeks of PPI usage?
I did know that. Yeah.
There's no, and anyone listening, that is just phenomenal. And we have people from the ages of like 0 on low dose PPIs, especially kids who have like what they call colic now that they're getting it. And so I keep trying to look at PPIs as why are they being prescribed? And now we've got this new product on the shelves called Nexium. You can go over the counter and you can buy like these PPIs, and you've got Gaviscon, and you've
Yeah.
got these different products. And I don't know if you realize this, but now in the UK, it's now been allowed for Pepsid. So the little pink bottle that you
Yeah.
get, that's now been published in the United Kingdom. And so these PPIs are strongly linked with acid reflux because of that cycle. Now, the issue becomes is that increase in histamine, but also the increase in ammonium. And the reason why I bring back to ammonium again is if your stomach acid is low and we're told to go on high protein diets, so you're going to a high protein diet, or if you've got underlying H. pylori and you don't know, that increase in ammonium can't be broken down. And because the stomach acid is so low and it's not able to break it down, that ammonium starts to increase. And as ammonium starts to increase, what does it cause? A buildup of uric acid.
Uric acid. And just so for the non-practitioners listening, the reason that ammonium will build up is if you're on a high protein diet, or if you're is because you need stomach acid to break down the protein. I mean, it's the first trigger to break down food, basically. So I was just connecting that dot for people who are not practitioners.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, basically that. And so this is this is becomes the issue. It's this cycle we've got into of symptomatic relief. So
Yes.
symptom relief, that's where it's
Yes.
all come from. And so now this brings me on to why like we got into the idea of toxoprevent.
Thank you for closing
And
that circle.
so sorry, I wanted to close that circle, close that circle off for everyone. So when we first started toxoprevent in 2006, we were a replacement for PPIs, all because of those two magical words, ammonium and histamine.
Got it.
So we now know that ammonium in H. pylori creates a protective shield.
Right.
We also know that if ammonium is high in high protein diets and you have poor liver function, what will happen is the bicarbonate that's produced by the parietal cells gets pulled from the stomach into the liver and the kidneys to process that ammonium out because it will try and convert that ammonium back into urea to get it out of the urea cycle. So because the bicarbonate's pulled out the stomach, it means the acid is left to cause more issues. And so we started realizing that if you took away the ammonium in the stomach and you
Yeah.
took away ammonium away in the digestive tract, but then you also balance the histamine and or you remove the ammonium shield from H. pylori, it doesn't matter whether you have H. pylori, acid reflux, GERD. If you start to detox those three or two things, shall we call them, out of the body, you actually begin to create acid, the balance. And then your magnesium stores go up, then your vitamin D stores go up, then your vitamin C stores go up, and all those basic amino acids that your body needs in the mineral storage can be extracted from the food. So your B12 will miraculously start to go up because all those things are blocked by PPIs.
Yes. And explain. So because again, we need stomach acid to facilitate the absorption of those nutrients. So, as Dilly very articulately pointed out, this that ultimately is probably why PPIs are actually only licensed for short-term use, but that seems, i.e., 13 weeks, and there's nothing. They're not. But we are continually seeing clients who are coming in who have been on PPIs for, I mean, years, who just been prescribed these ongoingly, right?
I mean, ongoing is probably the understatement. I remember meeting a chap and I did a talk and he turned around and said to me, he goes, oh, because Dilly, I've been on PPRs for 16 years. It's like, oh, really? He's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I
me
goes,
too.
what else are you taking? And he goes, oh, I've been given iron. So ferrous sulfate is the supplement I use, which you know and I know is just probably one of the worst forms. And I was just sat there and I was like, has anything clicked in you that this is very worrying and you've got severe like weight gain in your body? And he was just like, yeah, but the doctor told me. And I was like, but the doctor doesn't know because the doctor doesn't realize because they're so busy. Don't get me wrong, doctors are incredible, incredible human beings, but they're so busy that they don't have time to deal with the person and understand it. And like if you actually read the guidance on what to do if a person has acid reflux, it's actually comical. It's actually comical. The suggestions are that you put a book behind your head and raise the back of your head a little bit, a book or some sort of like tray or something, not a pillow, not a pillow, because a
A
pillow would
tray.
a tray or something to kind of hold yourself up. The second thing is to eat smaller meals. Now, what did the people from glucose look at? They say that if you have small meals and you have a massive glucose spike continuously, that's an increase of weight gain. So these solutions aren't solutions, they're symptomatic relief. And this is the problem. Like we've become so focused on symptomatic relief that we're not looking at the bigger picture because even things like calcium, one of the basic principles that needs to be broken down from the food to be in order to be absorbed, and
Of
iron.
course.
And now we're seeing like I did a presentation with yourselves and you can watch it on H. pylori, but we talked about all of these rise in iron B12 conditions all on the rise. Where do you think they've all stemmed from? The stomach, right?
Of
It's the
course.
stomach,
Yeah.
the GI
Yeah.
tract.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So Toxaprevent was originally came to market as a replacement for for PPI, you said, but it is a multi. Can you actually talk through to our listeners actually what it is? Because some people won't know. What is Toxaprevent?
So toxaperent is zeolite clinoptilolite. It's a form of volcanic ash, but toxaperent is the only licensed medical device. And what that means is we were granted our medical device license in 2006, and we've held it since then. By the way, this is a very incredible, impressive thing to hold because it's all
Yeah,
about quality,
absolutely.
insurance, conformity to the regulations. And the reason why we got that was because we had to prove what we bound to. We had to prove all the toxins we bound to. That was like things like histamine, heavy metals,
Right.
ammonium,
Yeah.
like amines like trimethylamine, nitrosamines, mold,
Yeah.
mycotoxins, aflatoxins, ochratoxins, which are the popular words right now. That
Yes.
we proved that we could bind to them and we removed them from the body via the stool. So we showed, secondly, that we only stayed in the digestive tract, which is very, very important because a binder of any sort shouldn't enter the liver or kidneys because it's a rock, it's a volcanic ash. There's no way of proving that it leaves the body. So it shouldn't go into the muscles, the tissues, the blood, the brain, because there's no evidence that it leaves. So that was our second thing we had to prove. And then the third was the quality of what the actual product was. And so we proved that the quality that our processing removed anything. And what you've got in all the products is complete purity. Every time you open a product, you'll see that it's in an individual sachet, it's vacuum sealed. And that was to reduce any chance of like the air toxifying it. Because the minute you have that product on a shelf and it's open, it will bind to anything in the atmosphere. And so that was kind of one of the main premises why we bought Toxbrent out. And because we approved that we removed ammonium and histamine, you can see why we suddenly became a replacement for PPIs, which,
Of
as you
course.
can imagine, was not liked. Was not liked.
Okay. And and how long can an individual be on this product?
For as long as they need. It's
Right. Okay.
because it's like I always say it's like a garbage truck. It's going through the body and it's picking up what the body doesn't need. But the problem is, like Tanya, you did an incredible video on your Instagram talking about mold and mycotoxins, and you look at some of the things like practitioners like yourself are saying, are we're exposed to these toxins on a daily basis.
Yes.
And yes, the body is impressive. Don't get me wrong. The body is impressive in detoxing, but then you add food, then you add the air that we breathe, then you add lack of nutrients, then you add the things that we spray onto the crops, then you add all the inflammatory foods we have to eat, then you add stress, then you add sitting in moldy offices and old offices, and then you add in colds and viruses. It's a lot for the body. The body wasn't built for the modern age. Our bodies are not built for the modern age, and they call sitting the new smoking. But Jesus, this rate, better I'll start smoking at this rate because you probably reduce the chance of getting all the medications. I joke, but it's just the body's not built for it. So just how you would clean the garbage in your house, it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's just a garbage truck going in and going, "Hey guys, what have you got for me? Load it up, take it out."
Okay. Okay. And that makes complete sense. And you have two different people always ask this question, but I'm just going to ask it because you can reel this off in your sleep. So there are two different color boxes, and they represent different components of the GI tract of working on it. Could you explain that to our listeners?
So you have the Toxaprevent Medi Plus sachets, which is the purple box.
Yeah.
That works in the upper GI. It's in a vacuum sealed sachet that
Yeah.
you mix with water and drink, and that will work in the mouth, esophagus, and stomach. So anything in the upper GI. It's also got a specific H. pylori and acid reflux protocol. And then the capsules, they're in the blister packs. You'll see
Yeah.
that those capsules are enteric coated. So they have a delayed release. So it takes about 30 minutes for them to transition through the stomach and they open up in the intestines and the colon. But the
Love
way
it.
that they open up is not just kind of like a big burst, it slowly breaks down through the intestines and just drops the MANC, which is the actual binder, into the intestines where it binds to all those things like histamine. And that's the difference. So upper GI, which is the purple, lower GI, which is the red.
Got it. Great. Fantastic. Okay. And in your, well, you are always very honest. So, in your opinion and with your experience, okay, I'm about to say something that's going to rock the boat. How effective do you think following a really restrictive, low histamine food plan is over taking this approach of, well, let me phrase that, well, within that sort of statement, I think
Mhm.
it's a very, histamine intolerance is a very overused phrase. So we've talked about, and you've explained really beautifully, that really any sort of environmental trigger, be that pollution, be that smoking, be that, which is good for you apparently,
I
be
joke.
that, no, no, be that mycotoxins, be that stress, is a trigger for an histamine dump by the body, because all of these components can overly sensitize mast cells, which then liberate their contents, and we have sort of this overflow of histamine in the system. Now, when that happens, it's very common for practitioners to maybe be tempted to employ quite a restrictive histamine low, or a low histamine food plan. And clients, and I find that incredibly difficult to follow. Do you feel that this is being overprescribed, and that maybe thinking about why the body is why is the body releasing histamine is a better way to actually approach this this environmental milieu that we find ourselves in?
Okay, thank you for that question. It's a good question, Tanya.
I
It's a good
know,
question.
sorry, it was completely curveball, but I just, you're a
Yeah.
controversial fellow, so I think you'll relish the answer.
Uh, so the low histamine diet was an incredible thing at the time. In 2004, 2006, it was an incredible, it was a big thing because it allowed the person to take control of their symptoms.
Right.
And the problem was it was kind of touted as the solution. But I've been doing this for 11 years now. So 11 years of doing this. I have not met someone who's turned around and said to me, Dilly, when I did the low histamine diet, I was able to go back to all my foods again. I've not met one.
No.
And the reason being is because we focus on food because we can control foods. I can control what you eat. I can say to you, you can't eat this for the next because you react to it. And we've got like the food intolerance test businesses are built on the back of
Yeah, yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
We've got all these things happening. But the issue is that there's more going on with the immune system other than foods. But because
Yes.
we can because that's been the narrative for so long by some like incredible journalists and incredible influencers. There's some incredible people out there. At the time, they were good, but I'm sorry, it's dinosaur work. That is dinosaur work. It's not the solution to it because if you actually look at what's triggering the immune system, that's the problem that people aren't talking about. You look, I've
Yeah.
just explained PPIs to everyone, how that triggers the body. We've now seen a massive increase in depression of young children who are on
Yeah.
PPIs long term. And then you kind of look at like colds and viruses. Look at the LC. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to get you banned or me banned. But when we talk about that, that's another reason why people immune systems are becoming overreactive, and that's where you get these what they call long C word people because their immune systems are just reacting to everything. But
Yeah.
it's okay, and this is my sarcasm coming in. It's okay. We'll stop adding foods in because that will solve it. No, because you're also removing fats, nutrients, minerals that our body needs.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. And like things like there are like supplements out there, like so people will go to like the quercetin, the vitamin C, the diamine oxidase, and don't get me wrong, they're good. They do have a beneficial,
But
but
they're providing, it's a bridge to provide symptom relief, but it's not addressing why the immune system is trigger happy and just liberating unconsciously, basically.
yeah, I mean, you can get stressed and release histamine. Your body
Yeah.
releases histamine because you have the histamine 3 receptor, which controls the central nervous system. Our body releases histamine in order to wake us up. So
Yes,
when
it's a
you're stressed,
stimulant.
it's a
Yeah.
stimulant, and it's like and people just think that it's like it's this bad word. It's not. Histamine isn't bad, but too much histamine is. And like please understand, like, I've been, with Toxiprevent for a long time, and it's our product. So we've, it's my, I call it my baby, but and it's an incredible product, but it's not the be all and end all in solutions. All
Of
it
course
does is
not.
get the person to baseline. When you detox the excess histamine, the mycotoxins, the molds, the ammoniums, and you just bring that toxic load down, and then you start remineralizing the system with like things like electrolytes, for example,
Yeah,
optimize the immune system through vitamin D, take yourself out to do grounding. It's just small little
I
changes
agree.
one has to make.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you start focusing so much on food, yes, the person feels in control, but it's only short-lived, 8, 12 weeks, and then someone will go, oh, I'm really sorry, but I'm now reacting to this. Or no matter what happens, my symptoms disappeared for 6 weeks and I felt great, but then all of a sudden I had this. And trust me, every forum, the story is exactly the same.
Okay. See, you did answer the question. But yeah, Dilly's face looked at me initially and was like, "Why are you asking me this?" But yeah, it's thank you. Yes, um I think really what we're saying is that we in this line of work, we never like to sit on our laurels and assume that what worked for us in 2006 or in yeah, we know more, we continue to learn more, we continue to challenge the narrative or what we were taught as to keep growing. And absolutely our environment has changed significantly, um, and very much since the COVID pandemic. And that has impacted our nervous systems, our immune systems. And this is the environment in which we need to work within now. And we can't ignore that.
Yeah, I mean, I like to. I remember in school, when I was a little, as a little schoolboy, I remember my sociology teacher used to say to me, he used to use an acronym KISS,
Oh,
which
go
was
on.
keep it simple, stupid. And I like to I like to live by that rule because I've realized like so much in life isn't easy. It's not straight line. And I always say to people, whenever I talk to people, I say, look, it's like it's you have your good days, you have your bad days, and it's constant. It's a cyclical cycle, and but you have the permission, and you have to give yourself the permission to have those bad days. You are allowed to have those bad days, but you also are allowed to have those good days. But if you keep it simple, stupid, and you think, well, okay, I've had these bad days, and I could do little changes and stuff, that's okay. That's completely fine. But when we start to overcomplicate and we start to overthink, and people call themselves like, I'm an overthinker, I'm a chronic overthinker, I can't sleep at night. This is keep it simple. Let's go back to the basics of like trying to bring our systems down.
Yeah.
It's not it's not exactly rocket science, but I think we've been kind of coached into be worrying about so many different things. But sometimes we just need to go back to, you know what? I'm going to use the word F it and just relax. Like, even if it's the worst thing you possibly do, like the right time. And I remember a really good friend of mine, Dr. Etienne Calabou, he remember said to me, because sometimes he goes, I'm sat in like a tornado, but I'm in the middle of the tornado. And he goes, I'm watching all the chaos around me, but I'm happy where I am. I'm content right here. And I used to think that, and it made me realize that that's what a health actually is sometimes. It can be completely chaotic, but as long as you can say, you know what, I can stay grounded in this and this is okay, you will feel so much better knowing that.
Here endeth the lesson from Dilly. Thank you. Amazing. Well, It's been just fantastic to talk to you and have you on the podcast. We will definitely bring you back. Your contribution to this industry, you bring so much. You bring joy, you bring positivity, and infinite amount of knowledge and passion. So I really can't thank you enough for partnering with Amrita, and just keep challenging the narrative, but also just your humility as well, Dilly. You bring so much, and I know our listeners love you as well. Your webinars are always, you know, people love to listen to you. So thank you for your passion, and we will look forward to more Dillyisms, and sociology and psychology in the next episode. Thank you, Dilly.
Thanks, Tanya.